There we go. And I'll start bringing people in. Give it a couple of minutes for them to all mute and all that stuff, and then I'll officially start it at some point.
Strange now, a little bit of normality. Virtual tastings are strange again.
it's been a while, I think.
All right, so for everybody who's just coming in, if I could ask you to mute, please. And then we'll get underway very soon. No problem with having your camera on, so we can see you guys, and you can give us some thumbs up and down and all that sort of fun stuff. But I'll ask that you remain muted until the end, when we can have a bit of a question and answer time. And we'll just let these last few get in, and then we'll get under the road. Get under the road, that's great. Get on the road.
Hey, all, how's it doing?
Alrighty. That looks to be about it for now. All right, so I will do start a little intro now, and then I'll hand over to you, Stuart, and we'll go from there.
No worries.
Alrighty, welcome everybody to another online virtual tasting. Today we're doing Pulteney, Old Pulteney. We've got a great range of whiskies coming up for you to all try and get some experience with, ranging from the 12 right through to the 25, and a couple of other bottles in there as well. We've got Stuart with us tonight, who is the Pulteney ambassador. Give us a wave, Stuart. If everyone in gallery mode out there. So he's about to take over and take us right through the range of whiskies and tell us a bit about not only each of the whiskies, but about Pulteney in general. If you have questions or anything like that, please put them in the chat. I'll be looking after chat while we're going through like normal. And I'll try and get your questions in as we do. I'll also be posting the links as per normal, and the discount codes and stuff that always go along with all this stuff. So what we might do is just get straight underway. So I'll hand over to Stuart now. And yeah, take it away, man.
All right. Hey everyone, yeah, I was just saying there, it is I've been traveling the last 3 weeks, and now doing virtuals just weird again. So hey everyone, welcome to this stuff again. Damien, is that Old Pulteney behind you?
Yeah, it is.
Nice. I thought so. I was like, it's all same kind of size, but they've changed it. Yeah, so you've got like all the peak week and all the white runs as well.
Yeah, I'm telling you, too expensive to get now.
That's cool. So you didn't think to put your Pulteney collection behind you? That's fine.
No, it's right there. Go on.
Oh, sweet. I see it. No, as Anton says, if there's any questions throughout this, put them in the chat. I don't even mind people coming off mute. Please, just as many as you can. The less of a monologue, the better. It makes it more fun for you, more fun for me, and more fun for these guys that are just paid to be here. Hey, Adam, Andy, and Craig, right? And Anton. But what we're going to do is we've got 5 whiskies. I don't know if I'm going to keep the other one, but we're just going to jump straight into the first dram. So the order we're going to go in as well, just so you guys know, we're going to go for Pulteney 12, then we're going to go for Huddart, and I always take a pause to let people get organised. 12, Huddart, 15, 18, 25, and then I'm not sure if it's a mystery whiskey, Anton. Are we telling them about it yet?
So now giving what work. No, the last one is they're all aware of what it is. It's in their pack. It's a signature vintage Old Pulteney 2008 12-year-old. So you guys will all have that in your pack. So that will definitely be the last one, all right?
Perfect. I know I already corrected me earlier since 6. And thanks, Howard. I like to play bingo with this as many times as possible. So I usually get the 21 to the 17. It's never come back. You never get it again. Never. Stop asking. The 1721, a lot of people remember fondly. The 17, I think especially, I get asked for quite a lot, is that we discontinued them back in what, 2018, 2019, something along those lines. We are not planning to bring them back. However, later on I will talk around some things that we might be releasing soon, but you're not getting it back. Stop asking, Howard. So as I said, we're just going to jump straight into the first dram, break the ice, have a taste, and then we're going to get straight into it. The one thing I'm going to recommend to you to do is just keep a little bit of the 12 in your glass. Try and keep a little bit in. The reason I'm asking you to do that is, well, sorry, it's early in the morning for you. You guys might have been drinking all day. I've definitely not been drinking all night. But when we're trying to get a taste of whiskey, the one thing is we're trying to bring our palates immediately up to that. So this is your first drink. Your brain, your senses are going to have to adjust up to a higher ABV. So taking that first sip of whiskey, that first sip of any kind of spirit, your brain's not going to adapt to it completely. So we're going to have a first drink, we first sip, we toast, then we're going to come back to it and see how it's changed at the very ending of the tasting, if I remember or if someone else just reminds me. But first one, Pulteney 12, we're going to have a sip and then we're going to talk about it. But cheers, Slange. Good evening, good morning, whoever else is putting in. Just a sip onto the nose. We'll talk about it in a little second, but it's just to bring it up and adjust your palate to it. So Old Pulteney, has anyone ever been to Old Pulteney? Annie, yeah? Peter? Howard, did you see him as well? Yeah? Well done. That's a bigger pickup than usual. So Pulteney is, or was, the most northerly distillery on mainland Scotland. And a lot of people talk about this as kind of like a marketing speech. And in a way, there is an element of truth to that. But location for Pulteney is really, really important. So I used to work as a sommelier for, 3-4 months, and then found whiskey and gave it up like a stereotypical Scotsman. I couldn't avoid this stuff. But we talk about terroir with wine quite a lot. And this is important when I lead into kind of the whole range, actually. I normally miss this and say it halfway through, but I think it's important at the beginning. We talk about terroir with wine, you know, what kind of soil it was grown in, what kind of grapes, all these kind of conditions, whether it's east side of the hill, or the west side of the hill, or whatever it may be. Whiskey, spirits, we don't really talk about it. We can start talking about chocolate malt when we use barley, for example, but realistically in commercial whiskies, we can't really talk about terroir, because once we distill, we kill all organisms that would affect flavor, texture, all these kind of lovely things to some intense degree. But with Pulteney and a lot of other coastal distilleries, we really can talk about terroir. And the reason being is when we mature at the warehouses, which all of the liquid that goes into Pulteney is aged up in Caithness in the north coast of Scotland, which is, as some of you have been, is a pretty intense place to age whiskey. But I remember doing a tasting in Germany a few years ago when someone discussed salt crystals cannot pass into the cask. They can't permeate cask's membrane, right? So everyone talks about Pulteney having a salinity, and for me, it's never been saline or never been salty. For me, it's a minerality. COVID prevented a visit. Oh, sorry, Josh, that's crap. But for me, it's not a salinity, it's a maritime concept. It's a minerality, because when we go to the beach, you guys a lot more frequently than me, when we go to the coast, we don't just smell sodium chloride salt. That's ridiculous to say. There's a lot more elements going on to it. You know, sand crystals, all these kind of things come into play. When we jump into the ocean, even then, it's still not complete salinity. So what's happening when we're aging at the casks at the warehouse is that over years, and we split this between dunnage and racked warehousing. Actually, we split that between the years as well, which is interesting. But when we're breathing in over these number of years, we're breathing in coastal air. Then we think about that over 12, 15, going up to 25 years in this tasting. That's a long time to be breathing that in and mixing it in. So the further that we age Pulteney, the more minerality that we get. And this obviously bases cask, whether it's going into a barrel, whether it's going into a butt, whether it's going into a barrique. In some instances, you're going to see this change completely. So one thing to focus on throughout this, anyone that knows Billy Connolly, this is a long Billy Connolly tangent. I will go on them frequently. Just try and pull me back as much as you can. But the longer that we go into these tastings, we're going to see the minerality compete with the cask more and more and more. And I think this is something that's not necessarily unique to Pulteney, but it's one that Pulteney does extremely well. So we've had a wee bit of taste of the 12. Is there any questions at this point as well? Throw them in. Great to see faces as well, if anyone wants to come on video. But one thing with the 12 is this is 40%. It is chill filtered, but I think is a great representation of Pulteney. You don't have to analyze this to hell. This is 100% ex-American oak, all ex-bourbon casks, predominantly second fill to about 70 to 75%, with the rest of the makeup being third, first, and refill hoggies into this. Decent salinity or decent minerality even into it, but for me, it's just red apples, it's juiciness. I was up at the distillery last week, and it's amazing how close to new make spirit this actually is. If any of you ever have the opportunity, I've actually got some new make on the shelf over here, but I can't give that to you now because of many reasons. But the new mixed spirit is really fruity, it's funky. Has anyone ever had rum agricole? Does anyone know rum agricole, like Trois Rivières? No? If anyone can get your hands on, you'll be able to get like small bottles. If you can get your hands on rum agricole, it's, for me, is very, very close to what Pulteney's new mixed spirit is. That very funky, fermented, tropical fruit note. And as soon as it goes into cask, even for 3 years, you see that subtle and soften quite a bit. The 12-year-old, I think, is a great example of showing new mixed spirit all the way through. Now, if anyone's just joined, keep a little bit of the 12 in your glass, because we're going to come back to it as well. We're going to come back to it and knows that everything else you can do with the hell you want with it. 12 you can do what you want with it. It's your whiskey now. I'm not going to dictate. But that's what we're talking about. So those of you who've been to a distillery up in Pulteney, you'll know how far north it is. You hit Inverness, you're halfway there. It is really, really far. So we're up in Wick, which is in the Caithness coast in the north. Howard, what is that you've just brought out? You're just showing off. That's the last one in Australia. Any money, that's the last one. You got 5 more behind you. Any money. Brilliant. So Caithness up in Wick. So Pulteney Distillery, or Pulteney as a whole, the Wick, was founded by a guy called William Johnston Pulteney. Now, Wick wasn't called originally Wick, it was Pulteney Town. If any of you have a map or Google, you can pull up Wick and look at it on your phone. You'll see it split across the bay into 2 distinct areas. On the south end of the bay is Pulteney Town. It was founded by a guy called William Johnston Pulteney and a guy called Thomas Telford. Thomas Telford was an architect renowned for developing most of the UK. Has anyone been to the Craigallicky Bridge? One of the most iconic bridges. It is the doorway to Speyside. A lot of people have seen it. You'll have seen it in photos and magazines countless times if you're a whiskey fan. Thomas Telford designed the Craigallicky Bridge. The guy was prolific. It's a name that you might not have heard of, but it was prolific across the UK with some iconic scenes, especially within whiskey. But Thomas Telford commissioned and built Pulteney Town, which is on the south end of the bay. And you can actually see it, kind of the gridiron street pattern slightly changes as you see Wick, the more modern city, mid-1800s, come into play on the north side of the bay. But the interesting thing about Pulteney Distillery is that the town built around us. So we have no room to expand into anything. It's just pure, we've had to level up as opposed to level out. So we're still a very small distillery. We're 2 stills. We've capacity, litres of alcohol, with capacity for about 1.7 to 1.8 million litres of alcohol per year. We will run maybe 1.4, 1.5. There's a reason for that. We don't want to burn everything off too quickly. The same way if you're cooking an egg in a really, really hot pan, or compared to a cooler pan, you're going to be able to prepare a much better egg on that cooler pan. If you run capacity 24/7, 365, you're not going to be producing the best new mixed spirit ever. So we run it a little bit less. And every distillery will really do this as well, but it's always interesting to hear LOA. Any questions at this point? Does anyone want to come off mute and ask? All good? Toffee and hazelnuts, no. Vanilla malt, creaminess in the palate. Nice, Leo. Any other tasting notes from anyone? Anton, you had a sip yet?
Yeah, I've had a little taste of it, and I'm leaving the rest as instructed for the end. But yeah, no, nice. I think it was you who said before about apples. Definitely got that. Nice.
Yeah, I think the thing is as well, like a lot of people get bogged down. I always like to do my tastings as lazy as possible when we talk about tasting notes as well. Tasting notes in the back of a bottle are great. But at the end of the day, tasting notes in the back of a bottle have been designed by Stuart Harvey, our master blender, Malcolm Waring, our head distiller, and myself and my boss Lucas, and then a number of other lab people. We do these tasting notes, but at the end of the day, we all come from, well, Lucas comes from Poland, and one of the guys Spanish, but we all come from a very locality. Everyone has very different tasting notes. Everyone tastes different things and grown up in different parts of the world. It's so important for people to give me their tasting notes, because it gives you an impression of that whiskey. If I just sit here and go red apple, vanilla, salinity, that's great, but it's the power of suggestion is such a big thing. When you give me your tasting notes, you develop a relationship with that whiskey. you develop a much bigger understanding. So the next time that you taste it, you're not trying to recall tasting notes that's been given to you or you've read in the back of a bottle. You're recalling the last time that you drank it and how differently it's changed, how it's not changed completely. But it's always really interesting to do that.
Yeah, and whiskey in general, regardless of where it's from, can be a very subjective, very personal experience. You know, I know this is more broad brushstrokes here, but people who like lighter, fruitier things through to heavy peat, through to, you know, heavily sherry bomb things, every individual is going to assess each dram differently. And so that's 100%. A good point you make, that to go back and remind yourself of what you experienced is more important than what a sales or a marketing pitch on the outside of a bottle, or what someone who's got a completely different nose to you might be telling you.
100%. And, you know, like at the end of the day, like I've got this brilliant document on my phone with all the chemicals that naturally occur within casks and what they impart on spirit industry wide. And it's, you know, aldehydes, esters, all these different things, and the chemical name, and then what that gives you. So from a lab point of view, people are looking at, you know, aldehydes and esters and saying, right, this is giving this kind of chemical makeup, so it should give these tasting notes. So the technical is correct, but what my pineapple might be mango to you, which is two quite different flavors, despite the fact they're in the same kind of wheelhouse. They're in that kind of same.
Both tropical fruits, but you know, you put them in front of a person, they're going to tell them apart like that.
Yeah.
You know, so very interesting. That must be a very complex document.
It's not too complex. I can actually send it across to you and you can distribute. It's just a simple, you know, all the chemical makeups and then the namers. For example, the easiest one to remember is vanillin. Can anyone have a guess at what that produces?
What was it called?
Vanillin.
Oh, vanillin.
And I swear it gets a lot harder. It's a big jump up from pronunciation from there. But I can send that document across. It's a very simple.
That would be great. That'd be very interesting.
Yeah, it's and a trick as well when we go into it, you didn't think we'd last an hour with 6 whiskies. Just watch me talk. There's an interesting Ian Logan, who's the global ambassador for Glenlivet. He was my mentor when I was out in India. He talked about like starting big and working your way down. Everyone's so obsessed with saying this is, you know, crushed Oreos and a melted fireman's boot, and trying to be that specific about a tasting note. And, you know, Scotch Malt Whisky Society do this beautifully. You know, you read it and go, that's exactly what this tastes and smells like, right? But when you start big, you can work your way down. And Anton, when you're saying like tropical fruit as a category, you know, you can say like, okay, this whiskey's sweet, but sweet could be fruit, it could be candy, it could be treacle kind of toffee. And you say, okay, it's fruit, but is it orchard fruit? Is it tropical fruit? Is it candy? You know, it's berries or grapes. And it's a really handy tool to start big and try and work your way down to the point, as opposed to try and get the point. You know, just take a step back and don't stress yourself out and work down. And this is something I still use. I'm still terrible at tasting notes, but you know, the amount of whiskey I drink, I think you can hear my voice used to be angelic. It's pretty horrendous. But like, taking that step back and working your way down is a really useful tool to just work your way to as close to the point as possible. And it's a really good exercise and train your brain to pick out certain things. It's very, very handy. Anyway, chatting way too much. Are we ready for dram number 2?
I think we are. Yeah. What's next?
We are moving on to Huddart. Now, this is a really interesting one. There's only one, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because there will be more, but there's only one I can immediately think at the top of my head every time I do a tasting that does this same process, but they use a different style of cask. There's some really interesting talking points to this. So Old Pulteney Huddart as a whole is 46%, non-chill filtered, no caramel colouring in this. This is all ex-American oak, all technically ex-bourbon. And I'll tell you what I mean when I mean technically ex-bourbon. It's all ex-American oak, and it's a non-age statement called Huddart. So Huddart is 2 things. It's the name of the street that Old Pulteney Distillery is on. It's also the name of an old fishing boat captain called Captain Joseph Huddart, who was responsible for mapping out the north coast for Thomas Telford. And he also was a cartographer for the West Indies and East Indies, mapping them all out. So he's a pretty famous dude in the 1800s. But the thing with Huddart is this is bourbon cask and then finished in peated whiskey casks. However, the peated whiskey casks that we use are not from Islay. So the smoke that you're going to be getting from this is not that, I mean, I adore it, but it's not that medicinal TCP style. It is forest floor style. So what I mean by that is you have different styles of peat. If you take peat, which is semi-fossilized plant material From Islay, it's going to be seaweed, it's going to be kelp, it's going to be, crustaceans, it's going to be a lot more mineral and salty. Whereas the peat that we use, these are ex-Anoch or Knockdhu distillery casks. This is Aberdeenshire peat. So it's mainland central peat. So it's going to be wood, oak, flowers, grass, all that kind of thing. So it's going to be a very different style of peat smoke. And I know I'm talking about peat a lot, but at the end of the day, this is finished in casks that previously held peat. This is not a peated whiskey. So this is going to be delicate aromas of smoke, but what you're really going to get at the forefront and the more prominent flavors, well, you tell me, because I'm not going to get into this again. I'm going to be as lazy as possible. But we're going to see more influence from the American oak than we are from peat, because it's not peated new make spirit. This is Pulteney new make, which is always unpeated. We got Josh, you're sitting in a warehouse. You must be getting some pretty good notes. I'm going to start picking people out. We'll get 3 drams in, everyone will want to talk, but Josh, what'd you get?
Like the peat comes through, but you're right, I'm not a big peat monster. Your iodine type of peat, which I'm not getting at all. It's actually more like having a bonfire on the beach peat. The smokiness to it, with that mineralness to it as well. Very much. I feel like I'm having a bonfire on the beach with this on the nose.
Brilliant. And I think that's the objective, right? It's meant to be wood fire smoke as opposed to, and I saw Dave in the chat saying, I don't get any smoke in the nose at all. Anything that's a good thing for us, that's kind of the objective. It's not meant to be that powerful, but when you take this onto the palate, slowly exhale through your nose, and I think you'll start getting it more there because you've started dissipating the alcohol on the palate.
Very soft, sweet vanilla to it as well.
I think so, yeah. Jim saying sticky toffee pudding up front, but aftertaste is just like autumn leaves. How romantic, Jim. Did a few tonight. That's a good one. Red apples in the palate, slight grassy undertone, the peat comes in the finish. And Rory saying not a big peat fan. I'm glad you said that, because I use this quite a lot for people that aren't peat, because I think we associate peat with Islay. And I'm not going to sit here and denounce Islay. I adore. When I did the whiskey show in London, we got a bit overzealous on the Saturday night. You had some really, really, really lovely drams getting thrown about by all the exhibitors. We had a kind of after party, which was fantastic. It's like watching like Charlie McLean run around. It's like watching Keith Richards. It's great. But we got a little overzealous, and the next day this has been recorded, I was a little bit delicate the next day, and I managed to pluck up the courage. And a friend of mine, David, works for Lefroy, so he gave me a cask strength Lefroy 8-year-old, and I had a Scotch egg, and it saved my life. So I'm a huge fan of Islay, like massive fan of that, iodine, medicinal, peaty kind of style. But this is not that, it's not in any way, shape, or form meant to be that. So when I give people that aren't peaty whiskey fans, their immediate association is Islay peat. It's not going to be mainland Aberdeenshire peat, which this is. So this is from ex-Anoch whiskey, which is one of our portfolios as well. It's one of our distilleries. So it's a very, very different style. Grassy note in the palate, yeah. It's light. It's, and again, it's that bourbon cask that's really coming through in it. And then at the very end is, I always don't like to say peat because it's smokiness. It's not quite the peat that we know today. We'd really have to kind of adjust our brains to do that. But of interest, because these are quite two different ones, has there been a favourite between the 12 and the Huddart immediately? Because these are quite two different styles of Old Pulteney. I'll just do hands. 12. Not going to have many people in Huddart. All right. Okay. Interesting. And then I've had Huddart and Huddart. Excuse me. But yeah, I think it's an absolute cracking one. And again, 46% helping carry the alcohol through, non-chill filtered and natural colour, which, as I was going to talk about the casks, this is ex-American oak in the sense that these casks have been filled. For the peated whiskey cask, this will be the third time that it'll be used, that oak has been used. And for the ex-American oak, it's probably second, third, and potentially some refill hoggies in there, which would be technically fourth time the oak has been used. So by saying ex-American oak, it's more, I think we're being overly, I always feel that we're being overly transparent with that, because I don't think there's anything wrong with putting ex-bourbon, because that's predominantly the makeup, but you are going to have casks in there that's fourth fill. And by the time we get to fourth fill, you're not seeing as much ex-bourbon flavors come through, if that makes sense. You're seeing maybe less of the vanilla, less of the red apple, less of the coconut coming through into it. But the majority of this is going to be second to third fill. So you are going to see that ex-bourbon come through. Milestone PX peated, the first whiskey that changed my mind in peated whiskey. Sherry peat is one of my favorite, go-tos, right? It's not even a guilty pleasure. It's just so damn good. It's two things that really come together. If you can get like a small cask, like say if you get like a firkin, it's great. I'm not swearing, it's fantastic. But if you get like a firkin-sized sherry cask, so it's, you can age it, keep it really young, keep the peat really prominent, and get loads of sherry influence. Amazing. I'll buy loads of bottles off you, no problem. If there's any questions, please just give me a shout. No problem at all. Anton, the storage behind you, is that Malcolm behind you? I'm trying to, in the screen.
It's Craig's. No, to be honest, I've been sitting in front of it. I don't know what. I'm not really sure what it is.
So that's our filling store. So when you come into the courtyard of Pulteney, as you come up, it's like kind of at a 45-degree angle on your left. So that's the filling store. That's with a fresh door. That doesn't look like that anymore. That's a while ago. So that's where we fill our casks. So in behind that is where the stills are, and the low wine, the spirit safe, effectively. So the spirit store will come in, it'll store there, and then we'll fill our casks from there. So that's the guys. How casually he's holding that, I can only imagine it's empty, unless that's a really, really strong man.
Just the one I'm putting you.
Yeah, it's easy. So I can imagine that's then getting set up to be put in. And then that's also, I don't know if anyone knows our whiskey liqueur Stroma. Not sure if you guys have it or have seen it, but Stroma is made in there as well. And Malcolm will not tell me how he makes it. He just won't tell me. It's not like I'm holding back a secret. He just refuses to tell me. So only he and the assistant distillery manager and our brand manager know exactly how he makes it. And the only reason we told the brand manager is because she had to put it past food guidelines. So he's been really secretive about that as well.
I'll just say to Dave in the chat, it'd be interesting to let us know if your mate who's not overly into peated whiskey, if he does like this one. And Howard just said that Isla Bay for first time peat intros as well. I think it's a very subtle, and like you said, it's almost like peat's the wrong word. Smoke is probably the more apt flavor for this, rather than that Isla association. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and it's there's actually, I'm trying to remember, I don't want to start talking about it but it's worth looking up if anyone's interested. There's actually 3 different types of peat you can get in Scotland. You've got Isla, which is very medicinal and iodine, but then you've also got an East Coast one, which tastes slightly different. It's a slightly different chemical makeup. And then you've obviously got Central. But if anyone wants to look up the East Coast, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but if anyone's very geeky like me and wants to look it up, it's always interesting. But I took Swedish visitors yesterday, and they gave me a Swedish peat whiskey. And it was really, really different. I've never tasted a peat quite like it. And it's very much, for me, it was very much in between what we've just tasted kind of style and, say like Frog, Lagavulin and Kalila, which is really, really interesting. I love that, Leo. Yeah, full ingredients are on the Germany ones, but not how we make it. So I know the ingredients, but Malcolm's just been, he's been sneaky. He's been sneaky. I'm going to watch him. I'm going to do a shift up there and ask him. But Leo, I had the exact same thought. I was like, wait a minute, I know that they have to disclose it. But yeah, that's interesting, Dave. So you didn't see it at all on the nose, the peat or the smoke. Don't know where Dave is, or if he's on camera. No, he's not. Dave, if you want to come off mute and let us know, feel free. But yeah, it's interesting you didn't see any peat or smoke. Did anyone else see the smoke on the nose? however gently. I do see it very, very
Just a
delicately.
touch, like just it's there, but yeah, it's not a prominent.
No, not at all. And it's not, it's, as I said earlier, I think someone had mentioned it. I'm not sure if it was you, Dave, that mentioned it earlier, that it's probably a good thing that you're not getting on the nose for us, because that's the objective here. It's meant to be the bourbon cask that we're seeing first, and then the smoke's like a dash of salt on your dinner. It's that, brings the flavor alive, but it's not meant to be the prominent one. So that's a good thing. Peat, not smoke in the nose. Interesting. Are we ready to move on?
I think so. Let's go.
Yeah.
15. Yeah.
15. Now, I always say this before I drink it, but bugger it. I don't want to sway anyone, but the 15 is my favorite. This is a very personal thing, right? Everyone has different taste buds. This might not be your favorite, but this is, for me, this is where Pulteney has that specific point, that perfect point. Have a nose of this, have a taste of it, go for it. And I'll just start talking about it and put tasting notes in the chat if you want. For me, I've done quite a number of tastings over the years, but we have this one thing. It's a lot of people still assume, I'm not saying anyone here does, but a lot of people still assume that when we age, in the graph, as age increases, everything else gets better. There's this assumption that everything else just gets better. And there's one story where I was gotten out of my bed very early, and I had to fly to Mumbai to do a VIP tasting. So I was a little bit grumpy, and we arrived and the guy was there and he said, I love peaty whiskies, but I only drink single malts that are 21 years and older. And I was like, right, so you don't like peaty whiskies? And he was like, no, I love peaty whiskies. I was like, no, you don't, because, and I was a little bit short. But as a lot of you might know, is that peat is most captured between 3, obviously legally to become Scotch whiskey, 3 and 10 years old. If you want peaty whiskey, that's the best time to have peat. After that, peat starts, or maybe not immediately after that. Lefroy can last forever because their cut is so deep and they're capturing so many phenols. But if you get to 20, 25, 30-year-old whiskies that are peaty, it becomes really fresh and lychee berry and raspberries and cranberries. It's delicious. It's really sweet and juicy and almost tastes like it's a younger whiskey. It's really, really bizarre. But if you want peat, 3 to 10 years old is absolute prime time. So when we age, for example, what I'm saying here is when we age, peat actually decreases. You have other things that will increase. Some things will hit a kind of optimum point and fall back again. So for the 15-year-old, for me personally, along this age line, the things that have fluctuated or increased or whatever, 15 hits that sweet spot for me. Howard, not far away from the 17, not saying anything else. Not the 17, we're not far away, but it hits that sweet spot for me where the minerality that's been infused into the casks from the sea air, the maturity of the oak, everything kind of comes into play and hits that sweet spot for me. This comes in at 46% ABV again, non-chill filtered and no caramel colouring. So raw whiskey, the only thing that's been done to this, the same with the Huddart, is it's been diluted down to 46% and that's it, which is obviously industry standard. So it's raw natural whiskey, really great colour on it. If anyone sees new batch 15, you'll see it's much, much darker. Damien, I don't know, is that new batch there? I've gone through my 15, so it's not really a great colour comparison. Could you hold it up to the camera, Damien? Sorry.
Yeah, that's a new one I grabbed off the whiskey company.
Yeah. I think, Anton, you've got it as well, yeah? Yeah, you can see the colour's a lot darker. So we had really, the funny thing is that 18, I don't know if you've got an 18 there. Sorry, that 15, I don't know if you've got an 18 there, Damien. Of course you do. Of course. So that's the 18 there on your left.
Yeah, that's the 18 here, and that's the 15.
So we'll go and talk about it in a second, but you can see, sorry, David, I'm using it as a prop here. You can see the colour differentiation. The 15 actually spends less time in sherry, but the colour differentiation is, almost the same, right? Sorry, David, now you're getting... So the 15 actually spends less time in sherry, but the sherry casks that we used for this batch were so reactive. So you're seeing a huge amount of influence come into it compared to the 18. But profile and nose and everything is the same. Thank you, Damien. Sorry, I won't let you hold them up any longer. I'm going to throw us back to gallery view. Awesome. So it's just one of those interesting ones. But the 50, I've still got original batch, which you can see is a lot lighter. This is roughly 12.5 to 13 years in ex-American oak, predominantly second fill. And then you're looking at 2 to 2.5 years in ex Oloroso, again, predominantly second fill Oloroso sherry cask. 46% non-chill, no caramel colouring. Beautifully balanced, getting the bourbon cask shows through, getting the brine sense in this one. I completely agree. Now, Malcolm will say no, but if you do add, if you've got enough, a little bit of water will change this. Now, when we add water, it doesn't mean it's going to change, but it doesn't mean if that's going to be beneficial for you or not, if that makes sense. It's only the best whiskey in the world is your favorite whiskey. The only person that can tell how good a whiskey is you, no one else, not your best friend, not your mum, your dad, anyone. You're the only one that can tell if a whiskey is good or not. I can sit here and talk about Old Pulteney and tell you all the facts and figures, but at the end of the day, if you don't like it, you don't like it. That's what I love about it, is that everyone's a whiskey expert, because it really comes down to, do you like it? Yeah, I like it. Great. That's it. It really is that simple. We can talk a lot of waffle around it, but it's down to individual palates. But that's, for me, that's just, that hits that perfect point. It's got really good legs on it, but if you want to add that little bit of water, it will change it. But again, it just depends if you enjoy that or not, is down to you. But it's got I keep forgetting the word. It's almost got like a slight dessert wine sweetness. It's not sweet in any way, shape or form, but it's got that kind of slight sweet pop on the nose. I don't know if I mentioned, all barley that comes into Pulteney is Scottish barley. Don't know if I mentioned that. So we get all of our barley from local farmers, and then it's processed down in Inverness and Bairds. If anyone's ever passed through Inverness, you'll see big silos on your left-hand side if you're continuing up north, if anyone's been up. So that's Bairds in Inverness. They also have a site further up past the bridge on the right-hand side as you're driving up. But that's Bairds. They process all of our malt, and then it comes up to Pulteney. And also one of the only distilleries that still use dry yeast, if anyone wants to know that fact.
Why
The
is
reason
that?
being, well, the reason being is it doesn't make economical sense for the drivers to take it that far north. But with more distilleries popping up, I think we'll move. But I remember I asked a really kind of naive question to Malcolm Waring, our head distiller. I was like, so surely, like, are you not seeing the effects on yield, and is liquid yeast not a lot more stable? And he went, I've been doing this for 20 plus years. I know how to work dry yeast. It was this very sit down, shut up kind of. Malcolm's absolutely lovely, but it was like, that was a very silly question. Yeah, of course. So we still use dry yeast up in Wick, which is one of the only distilleries still to do it, other than small kind of independent micro distilleries. But we still only use dry because it's not economical sense for the guys to take it up, but also Malcolm's still pulling yields very comfortably out of it, which is good.
Oh, great.
What's the thoughts on the 15?
Leo and Howard seem to like it quite a bit. I must admit, I don't have this one with me right now, but I had one just last week, and yeah, my assessment was very good back then. I thought we were talking about sweetness before. I remember it having sort of, I don't know, toffee, like crispy sort of fruit sweetness to it as well. That was I wish I had one in front of me. About the way you're talking about it, I'll have to go home and try and find one. But yeah, no. Does anyone else out there? Anyone else got any thoughts they want to either come off mic and say or put in the chat?
Actually enjoyed the
What was that, Roger?
Oh, sorry, my daughter was talking. I didn't realize I was not on mute. Apologies. Just logged on. So
No, you're right.
Paul Bannerman, any thoughts? You're on mute, Paul. Sorry to pull you out, but
yes, look, I agree with what was said, but I needed to put some water in it because it was a little bit spicy for me on the tongue, on the palate. But I put a bit of water in it, and it's beautiful. It's opened it up. Sweet. Can't tell you what sort of sweet because I've only had one taste so far.
Come back to after a few more. The confidence will go through the roof. But I know what you mean. Without water, it has that spiciness, right? It's got
Yes.
it's like almost like a pepperiness, and then adding water takes that
Yes.
immediately away from the palate. That's it. I don't know if anyone makes. We're venturing to territory where my grandmother and grandfather, big whiskey drinkers, would say, "Don't you dare!" if I went to put them in a cocktail. So before we maybe get to that territory, which I still do, because if the bottles are there, I'm going to do something with it. But does anyone ever make cocktails with whiskey? Does anyone do that at home? Yeah. So one of my two favorite cocktails in the world, Negroni, which we're not really talking about here because it's gin, which I absolutely adore. The great thing is you can start down with your finger and throw it back. It's been recorded. Inver House Distillers supports responsible drinking. My second favorite cocktail is a Paloma, which of course made with tequila, agave syrup, the cheapest and most sugary pink grapefruit soda you can find, lime juice, pink grapefruit juice. But see Old Pulteney Huddart or 12, because that minerality makes a surprisingly good Paloma. If anyone wants to try it, I'd highly recommend it. It's an amazing, amazing summer drink, but highly recommend it. It's never going to be a tequila one, and don't think about it as a replacement to that, but it's a nice, interesting twist on a Paloma, so I would recommend it. And then a Boulevardier with 25-year-old is absolutely delicious. However, not everyone can do that every day of the week. Yeah, that was good fun for our Indian visitors that came over a few weeks ago. It's the first time I tasted it. But yeah, absolutely delicious. It really is surprising because that minerality really kind of shines through in it. 15 so far, the favorite. If we had any other changes, 12 Huddart, 15. Who's for 12? Huddart? 15. All right, okay, so I think 15 is winning. I just saw Wilkie's table, just like half the people put their hands. Looks like a really nice night. Huddart's still my favourite, 15, love them both, amazing. That's a good answer.
I think love them both is a fair comment.
Yeah. Breakfast, lunch and dinner.
3-course meal.
Yeah, same thing, right? Are we ready for, not even the penultimate dram, we've still got 2 more to go after this. Are we ready for 18?
After the 18?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
So if anyone kept up a 15 year glass, you don't have to. It's maybe a nice thing to do is a comparison between the two on the nose. Even if you've finished your glass, you'll actually be able to pick it up and still smell it. But a comparison between the two is quite interesting. Especially, I think most of you will have new batch. Is that right, Anton? If that's coming, it'll be new batch 15, right? Sorry.
Sorry, yes, that's true.
Yeah. We're still running a soft palate and nose, but it's always interesting to see because colour's a massive thing for us. Even to this day and age, I'll still look at a dark whiskey and go, oh, that's interesting, even though it might not be as interesting as the counterpart. We had a 1978 Annock from the cask last week, drawn from it. I drank it up in Dundee the other day, sorry. It would have been quite a useful wee tool, but it's a 44-year-old whiskey, and it's much lighter than the 15-year-old Pulteney we've got here. Its colour does not indicate age, it doesn't indicate quality in any way, shape or form, but it can give you an influence of the flavour. But seeing the difference between the 18 and 15, 15 spends less time in sherry by about 12 months on average, but the colour difference is quite significant, but the nose is very, very different. The 18 for me goes into much darker notes. It's a bit more chocolate dustings, fresh latte coffee, where the 15 still has that kind of fruity note to it. The spices that we were talking about, Paul, that kind of like pepperiness kind of gets softened at 46%, even without adding water. I think with the 18, it softens those peppery, spicier notes and becomes a bit more relaxed in a way. So we have 3 drams together. If we were in the pub, best pals by now. Let's see some tasting notes. Brian, do you want to kick us off? I think I've called on you yet. Everyone's keeping their camera off because I'm going to pull them out.
Very definitely appley nose.
Nice.
I think it's what I know as Old Pulteney. That sort of fresh, could be out in the orchard almost.
Yeah.
A little bit of citrus in there too.
Yeah.
What kind of citrus, Anton, interest?
Probably I'm probably manufacturing this more than anything, but I'd say orange more than any.
Yeah.
Just that last little trail almost.
Jim, we've moved on to 18. Just saw you in the chat there.
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
it's funny. I did a tasting with I'm sure a few of you know Abby from Bruichladdich. If you don't, Abby's absolutely amazing. But I'm sure it was her. I keep saying this. I said it a few tastings. It's going to get back to her, and she's like, "Yeah, that wasn't me." I'm sure it was her that did this tasting, and it was instead of doing tasting notes, it was colours and shapes. And at first I was like, this is a bit hippy dippy, but it was actually really, really interesting because it kind of changed how you look at it. You know, someone said, oh, it's like a yellow triangle. And it's like, right, to me, that might be lemon, but someone else might be pineapple. You know, it's how you, it's just kind of, instead of us getting focused and saying on that point, it's really kind of opening up how we look at tasting notes. And it was a really interesting exercise because it kind of opened it up to a little bit more, less of a tangible concept and more open. Someone said a red circle. And someone's like, oh, like an apple. And he was like, oh, I kind of meant cherries. And it's like, okay, it depends on the size of the red circle, right? So it was weird, but a really interesting exercise for your brain to compute what you're tasting. You know, it reminded of anyone seen Ratatouille when he eats the cheese and the grape at the same time and it kind of pops off in his head. That's exactly what it reminded me of. Like, you know, this is the color that I'm tasting. It's, you know, is it synesthesia, where you taste colors and you hear colors and things like that. It's a really interesting.
What was the word you just used?
I think it's synesthesia. It's where your senses are mixed. So you'll hear color. You know, if you see purple, you'll hear sounds.
That's an interesting thing.
Yeah, it's worth a Google. But I think the Glenlivet potentially did a thing with somebody who had synesthesia, who was an artist who would listen to music and play and paint what he saw in his head. So it's an interesting one.
I went to school with someone who did that, and they tasted numbers. So maths class was always interesting, where they'd get an answer and they go, well, that's really bitter number. It's just the wiring in the brain.
What was the number of interest?
I think anything with a 7 was considered bitter to him.
I can imagine 8 being quite savoury. Like, I can imagine 8 being like a biscuit.
I remember all my maths classes probably tasted very bitter, to be honest. There wasn't a lot of sweetness anyway. That's really interesting, Josh. That's tasting numbers. Wow. Does anyone have any more actual tasting notes on the nose of the 18 here that we haven't covered? Barley sugar, Rory says in the chat.
Chocolate, dark chocolate.
Yeah.
Sweet sherry, more intense than the 15, says Domo.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Damien, because I think on the colour, you'd assume that 15 has more sherry influence, but colour-wise, yes, but I think flavour-wise, the 18 is definitely, and I'm trying to use this word correctly, like softer, but it's, you know, you can see that the sherry's had the influence on the new make from the 15 to the 18 more. I wanted to read that before I actually read it out, just in case. There's just football tackle. I was like, okay, just in case it was bad sideways. That's good on the 18 nose. You get the smell of grass after a football tackle and your face is planted in the ground. David, that a good thing?
It's a fond memory.
Chocolate with lemon and lime rind. So Josh, you're getting more sharper citrus, let's say, than for example, Anton's orange citrus, which is interesting. Not a fond memory, David. Interesting. You know, I love the 15. It is my favorite, but the 18 just has that after dinner drink, sitting comfortably, you know, nice chocolate dessert, and then sitting, sipping and finishing it. And then afterwards going to the bar and getting a little bit faster with 15 and drinks, right? It really is one of those ones to kind of take a step back and just look at. And when we get to 25-year-olds, you're going to see this kind of amplify again. But it's not just because of the age, it's the style of liquid that's being produced out of it. A few people have been to Wick. Has anyone been to Pulteney Distillery and seen the still? Does anyone remember the still and shape of it? So if anyone, feel free to Google it as well. So we've got the smuggler's kettle, it's called. Now, every single time I go up, it's our wash still. And I always kind of get taken back. So the style of our stills is a big boil ball on the top of the pot. So it's a big boil ball and then a very short stop. And then it's flat at the top. So it's actually the design of our bottle. But I don't think our bottle actually does it justice, because the boil ball on the still, a family of 5 could live in there quite comfortably. It's a huge, huge boil ball, which maximizes reflux, which is of course copper contact and then falling, well, not necessarily copper contact, but falling back into the pot and then redistillation. But the boil ball and the style of the still, it's been flat at the top. And the story behind it is that we had to cut it flat at the top. So we normally have a very beautiful swan neck that runs off stills. It's gorgeous, gorgeous swan neck. But when we first installed the stills, the roof was not high enough. So instead of a beautiful swan neck, we chopped it flat. And then on the sides is the line arm directly off the still. It wasn't till about 50, 60 years later that we installed a roof that you actually could fit it up. But the good thing is the beam runs right over the top of the still, so we're able to put that in. But it's a really interesting one. And there's about, I think it's about 16 or 17 distilleries in Scotland that still use worm tub condensation. So if anyone doesn't know what that is, worm tub condensation is effectively exactly what it sounds like. It's a giant tub of cold refilled water with copper coils that run around it, and the distillate runs around the copper coils, cools down. Now, you might think that actually increases copper contact, but actually decreases it. So this juxtaposition between the stills producing a lot of reflux and then less copper contact on the worm tubs then produces a slightly meaty concept to the new mixed spirit by allowing that kind of flowery, I remember saying that kind of fermented fruit rum agricole concept to come off of it. But the funny thing is that out of 16 distilleries in Scotland that have worm tubs, on our portfolio, 4 of them do. 4 out of our whole portfolio actually have worm tubs, which is, I don't think anyone else will have that ratio of worm tubs to shell and tubes. Again, super geeky, but a really interesting one. And then if you're Gordon Bruce at Anok, you decide to attach a shell and tube condenser that runs into a worm tub, because he's an insane genius. But it works. It absolutely works. So at Pulteney, we have the worm tub condenser, and we have a lathe that's our water source from Loch Hempbriggs, which is about, as the crow flies from the distillery, about 1.2, 1.3 miles. But the lathe that was designed by Thomas Telford is a man-made lathe that runs all the way up to the loch and then brings the water down into the distillery. That water is circulated in the bottom, and then as the heat rises in the water in the top, it then falls back out and into the lathe and then recools before it enters the harbour and the bay. And we've had that assessed many times, and it actually helps flourish life at the bottom of it. No one's 100% sure why, but life actually flourishes around where the water enters the stream. This is the same with Speyburn Distillery as well. If you go and actually look at the water outtake, there's life, there's algae growing around the pipes where the water's coming out of, and it's like bright green, and then it stops as it enters the stream. It's really, really bizarre, and it seems to love it.
That's interesting.
So some points there. Drove all the way to Wick, but missed the last 2 of the day. Drove all the way back. Steve, I'm so sorry. That's not. Steve saying he drove all the way to Wick, missed the last tour, and had to drive all the way back. You should have just stayed in Wick, tried to catch the next morning. Probably would have been faster by the time you got home. Had a full sleep. It's a long drive. It's a really long drive.
Leo also said that this one is one to have with chocolate or sticky toffee pudding, followed by maybe a coffee and cigars.
Yeah.
Like you said before, that nice sitting whiskey, you know?
Even at 10 to 11 in the morning, that sounds absolutely delightful.
What time is it for you right now?
I'm just going to clock off after this. My couch is right here. I'm just going to have a sleep. It is that. And I think when we get to 25, we'll go to 25 and just now, basically, but it will really kind of venture into that brightness again, that darker coffee chocolatey note that we got. And again, this is for me. If you see a difference, please let me know. But for me, that darker coffee chocolatey note ventures back into sweeter, fresher red apples again. It's something kind of happens in those 7 years. It's really strange. Now, before we go on to the 25, I think it's actually a good point to go back to the 12-year-old. If everyone's still got it. If you go back, if you don't worry, you'll get one. But go back to 12-year-old and smell it now and taste it now. You'll see a stark difference in it from what you remember it as the beginning. Is everyone seeing that? Immediate change, it's a bit brighter, it's a bit fresher. It's really, really bizarre, but I always encourage people to do that and keep something in their glass, because when we go back to it, it really shows the difference. You know, it's when we start drinking whiskies and whiskey tastings, I always encourage people to have a dram before they come into the tasting, which again, Inver House Distillers promotes responsible drinking. But it adjusts your palate, so when you come into it, your palate's not shocked, because we don't control that. That's just, you know, it's an unconscious reaction. Your palate's not shocked by coming into, you know, sometimes it's 46%, sometimes it could be cask strength stuff. You know, you're coming into it with a palate that's prepared for what's to come. But as soon as we jump into a whiskey tasting, I always feel it's unfair to the first dram, because it could be, you know, you could be doing a lineup of independent bottlers or competing brands. You know, maybe it's run by an external source. And I always think it's really unfair to the first dram, because people will taste it and go, oh, it's not the best. Drink through and go, this is great, this is great, this is great. It's getting better and better and better because I'm drinking and drinking and drinking. And then I will always go back to the first dram at whiskey tastings like that, because it'll change your perception of it. So I always encourage you, if you're ever in a whiskey tasting that situation and say it's, you know, it's Old Pulteney and Talisker and Highland Park, or whoever it may be, is go back to the first one and just give them a second chance, because you'll see the difference that will come through.
Just in the chat, Dave's asked if the 18 is a replacement for the 17.
I was avoiding that. I was just not going to answer it. Yeah, Dave, no, I don't think anything could replace the 17. We've still got, I think, 5 bottles sitting in the office at Airdrie, where our offices and 50 of our warehouses are based. No, don't worry about it. It's a really good question, because the 17, was it the 21? 21 or 17 was voted best whiskey in the world back in 2015, 2016. 17 was amazing and is amazing if you can still find liquid of it. I would argue that the 15 is closer than the 18 to the 17 in profile, but it's not the 17. You know, I've done it at whiskey shows before, and people ask me that question, and I say, you know, the 15 is probably closest. I also have to kind of, you know, temper expectations, because people go in and go, this isn't the 17. You're like, no, it's not. It's very different, but it's the closest thing to. I think the 18, as we talked about, just ventures over into that darker side of it, with 17 still had a very fresh, approachable nose and palate. But we still have 4 left, the 17, and we've got new things coming out. I actually, before we actually kicked off and before we start recording, I actually have one of the brand new things, one of the only 2 bottles that's in the world just now, sitting behind me in full view. So I just twisted the bottle just in case anyone decides to screenshot and zoom in. But there's a bottle here that is secret stuff that's coming out pretty soon, and I'm very, very excited for it to be released, based on allocation. So we'll see how much gets to us as well. Are we ready for the 25-year-olds?
I like the way the spiciness had developed just that little bit more. It sort of ran a little bit more around your mouth.
Was that the 18?
In the 18,
right.
yeah. I just felt it had sort of moved just a bit more, partly along the edges of my tongue, but then a bit more into the front of the mouth, which I found very pleasant.
I think the 18's got a better viscosity than the ones before. It's got a bit dense, it's denser, it's more heavy, it's more stick to your teeth, stick to your gums kind of style. But partly because of the heavier influence of sherry. And then as you're just aging it longer in general, you're going to see a little bit more viscosity. And you can always see that in legs, tears, tails running down the inside of the glass, and that'll give you an indication of what's going to happen before it happens. Right, 11 o'clock in the morning, it's past the watershed. We can do whatever we want now.
Just before you start on the 25, it's about this time of the night where I would normally say to everybody that we have got a discount code for these Pulteney bottlings for anyone who does wish to get their hands on one of their favourite of the night or favourite couple for the night. So I'm about to post it in the chat, but it's also all one word, first dram 10, FIRST DRAM 10. That'll get you 10% off any of these Pulteney bottlings, valid till the 8th. So just for you guys online here tonight, if you did find a bottle that you like, you can go grab 10% off that for the rest of the week, basically. So I'll put that in the chat, but on you go. Thank you very much for that.
That's grand. Just watching everyone type in furiously. But yeah, well, move on to penultimate dram. 25 years. Now, I am very guilty of this. I mean, even with a 12-year-old, 12 years is a long time. 12 years is a long, long time. I think the iPhone had just been released 12 years ago. Someone can fact check me on that. 12 years is a significant amount of time. What was everyone here doing 25 years ago? Does anyone want to answer that within legal reasons? Ron, this is recorded. 25 years.
25 years ago.
High school.
Yeah, we were 15.
Yeah.
Probably high school or doing very little of productive, anything productive anyway.
So
Peter's got a good one. He married his second wife.
What have you done 10 years ago, Pete? Black Douglas and Co, amazing day. Married the fourth. Love it.
Right. Then.
Anyway, so the reason I ask is we kind of take for granted numbers in a bottle, right? It's 12 years is a young, accessible first whiskey, right? It's, you know, the prices are pretty reasonable and all that jazz, but it's a really, really long time. And emphasizing that for 25 years. The reason I say that is because 25 years ago, these casks were put down in Pulteney by someone who's most likely no longer with us, definitely no longer working with the distillery, will definitely be retired by now. But 25 years ago, these casks were rolled into warehouse, had sat for a minimum of 25 years, brought together, and then this group of people are drinking from, what I can imagine, 2, maybe 3 bottles from the same batch. I mean, for that 25-year journey from Anton around school to whatever you all, like the first thoughts from Pete marrying his second wife, sorry, those points and all the journey that we've all been on throughout our lives to bring it all together here, to be sampling that kind of same batch liquid is for me what whiskey's all about. You know, we can talk about the marketing stuff, and I work within sales and marketing technically, but production's where I absolutely find my heart. I go up to the distilleries as much as possible, and I hope I kind of push that across, like how geeky I am with whiskey. I love it, but you know, it's not to forget the romance behind it. You know, I've had 4 jams this early in the morning. Wait to see me after lunch talking about this, but it's really, really important to remember that it's human beings that put this down in casks. This can only be made in Scotland. It's something I'm really proud of as well. But this been put in cask, and all of us are drinking this together. For all of those stars to align is remarkable. The chances and things that have led to that moment. So 25-year-old, 46 ABV, non-chill filtration, so allowing all those fatty acids, proteins, and natural into the whiskey, and then no caramel colouring. This is natural colour from the cask as well. Now we've had 4 whiskies together now, so it'll be the 5th. Tasting notes. Hit me. Sun's gone down as well. I can see from Alan. It was sunny when you started. We got Rory prefers the 18 over the 25. Interesting.
Just a quick question, Stuart. How long did it spend in a sherry cask of that?
Oh, sorry. You're looking at about 5 to 6 years in sherry. So significant, you know, really, really significant amount of time compared to 18's 2 to 2.5. So you're almost tripling that, right?
Yep. Just the colour in the bottle isn't as dark for that period of time. When whiskey gets more subtle, it should take on more colour and more flavour. It doesn't seem as quite as dark as some of the other bottles.
So my answer to that is 18 years ago. How long Stuart Harvey been working? Stuart Harvey's been working for about 17 to 18 years now. So in terms of cask sourcing, this wouldn't have been under his stewardship. So when Stuart Harvey came on, he's our master blender and responsible for sourcing the wood that inevitably Pulteney, Balblair, and our other distilleries go into. So under his stewardship, he's shifted his relationships from the sherry casks that we source now than we were 25 years ago. So that would have definitely influenced the colour that's coming through on it. And then also just in general, more reactive sherry cask. But this, you're looking at predominantly second fill, same concept as the rest. It's predominantly second fill, some first, some third, ex Oloroso. Toffee, apple, dried fruits. Is everyone just having a wee moment? Is that why everyone's just...
I get almost like that confectionery banana flavor, sort of like a Barney banana. You probably don't know what a Barney banana is, but like those banana lollies almost.
It's not a full banana, no.
No.
Oh.
And again, like a slight, almost vanilla-y. What are you alternating between there?
18 and 25, just to see that kind of difference in it, because it's I think it was Brian that was saying that vanilla spice is still there, that's still popping through. And it was funny when you go from the 12 to the 15 on the hard art and the 15 to 18, you see it less and less and less until you step back. Until you actually step back and see less sherry influence, and then just going from the 25 to the 18, you really see the vanilla pop off, and what Brian was talking about in that vanilla essence coming through in it.
Yeah, it's almost also a bit, I don't know, like marzipan-y or
yeah.
You know, like like the icing you get on like a Christmas cake, fruit cake, that sort of. It's again the essence, like vanilla essence, the almond essence.
Is it Battenberg cake that's the yellow and pink, Mr. Kipling? Does anyone remember? Is it Battenberg? Yeah. Just so Andy going, yes.
Great memories. Great memories.
The Mr. Kipling Battenbergs are absolutely delicious. Yeah, absolutely. And you know what's funny? So you and a friend of mine opened up. I don't know if anyone's seen Ardent. It's a small whiskey company. He's the creative director for them just now, and he did a brilliant video where he was tasting one of their single cask sherry. I can't remember what distillery it was from. And he was sitting there. He's like, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it. He's like, don't say it. He's like, Christmas cake. It smells like Christmas cake, and it's that great tasting note where Christmas cake is such a perfect tasting note, and it's the elements of Christmas cake, right? So it's, you know, in Christmas cake you've got raisins, cinnamon, demerara sugar, plums, wherever you want to put into it. And it's a brilliant tasting note because it doesn't necessarily mean all of it. It just means the sections of it, right? And Anton, I know you were talking about the icing, not the actual Christmas cake, but just
I was going more for the thing, but yeah, you're right. There's so many times you could use that and it be in some way appropriate, right?
100%. You could just use it and just like big brush blanket, like fine, that'll do. But it's true. It's a really perfect taste note because it encompasses so many different things, and then when you mix it all together, it produces something different. So I think it's really, really
in the chat. Josh has got oranges, sweet juicy oranges, vanilla and oak. Jim's got marzipan and toffees. What else we got there? Brighter Gerardo, apologize. It says brighter minerality. I can't talk tonight. Yet a softer palate, sultana toffee, and honeycombed malt on the palate, dark chocolate through to almonds on the nose from Leo.
Nice. Sultana toffee, is that a thing? That would be amazing if that's a thing.
I want to try it. Toffee sultanas. That's it.
100%. That's a thing. That must be a thing. That's someone Google that right now.
Take that to Shark Tank.
we had a skew that we were talking about recently in the lab, and we were analysing it, and we came up with balsamic raisins, like balsamic reduced raisins, and we were like, "Is that a thing? Like that's exactly what it tastes like." But I don't think that's a thing. We googled it, we couldn't find it anywhere. We're like, that's a niche market, but it's there. And it's amazing the taste notes that people come up with, and it's like, that sounds amazing. Why has no one ever come up with that? But whiskey really has that influence on you, right? It's amazing what it can do. It's absolutely amazing what it can do.
Especially after a fourth or fifth round.
Yeah. Thank God it's recording and all our good ideas are being taken down.
Yeah, few drams down, and it's like, oh, this is the greatest idea ever. Next morning, gone.
We should record all our drinking sessions.
Well, that could be dangerous.
How are we getting on with the 25? Howard, how does it compare to the 21? Because you've got a bottle right in front of you.
Oh, it's delicious. Don't get me wrong. It's can't be the 21. It's still lacking a few flavor notes that I really enjoy. But
Yeah.
It's the body of the 21, that rich creaminess that brings the 25 missing, but 25 has its own different way of going through, which is delicious. Still similar, but it's got a few more notes like it was a Christmas cake rather than the fresh fruit. That's a big difference.
Nice. So you're saying 21 has a bigger body?
A lighter flavor profile, which gives it a different type of body, completely.
Got you. Nice.
25's got more of a grape. You can pick up more of the grape on it, whereas this is more of the chocolate orange, the Christmas cake. You pick up the cinnamons in it.
Nice.
Yeah. I wouldn't say no to either.
Absolutely. Love the hats off to whoever thought of salting caramel. I know, genius, absolute genius. Adding salt. If anyone ever added like salt to a hot chocolate or something, amazing, absolutely amazing. Absolute cracking tasting notes. And it's amazing, you know, when we were talking about like memories there, like some people were talking about specific sweets, and it's funny that you know, it's amazing how much our nose, especially our nose, can bring us back to memories. The one thing I always remember when my gran passed away, and she was when I was like 10 or 11, but she wore a perfume that was discontinued in the 90s, and it was, you know, like I spent a lot of Christmases there, and my mum and dad in the emergency services, so like they would take me on weekends. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, and every so often, and I had with the big C word, we've made it such. We've actually, how long have we done? Like an hour and a bit, and we've not mentioned the big C word. That's impressive. But every so often I smell that perfume, and immediately I'm brought back to being, you know, 9 or 10 years old with my gran in the kitchen. And it's a really, really bizarre thing because we all experience that. And I think with wine, with any form of spirits, it's whiskey, brandy, cognac, whatever it is, we all experience that. And that's what makes it such a cultural thing, is when we smell these things, it brings us back to a memory as opposed to just tasting them. You know, it can really, really transport us into a specific moment in our lives. And that's what makes it so influential and so cultural for us, which I absolutely adore. Is that the link for the 25, Anton? Just
get it in there. So if people want to have a bit of a look at it, people who don't have the bottle, for example, or don't know what it looks like, and of course, if you wanted to go and grab one, but it's interesting looking at another one. Listening to what people are especially saying about the 25 and the 18 with their tasting notes, and like you said, where, you know, there's a step up, but then, you know, you've got that viscosity to legs with a bit more sherry, all the slight little differences, but along a similar journey. You know, there's a lot of similarities along that way. I got rid of my 18. Wish I'd have kept a little bit just to do the comparison that you're doing. I got too greedy.
That was water that I just threw down my throat. Don't worry, that wasn't really breakfast whiskey.
What was the sneaky gin there?
Monday, right? Gets me through it. So it was interesting to see someone kind of like, some people just kind of popped out and went, I prefer the 18 over the 25. So what's the favourites been? Those of you not on camera, just put down in the chat, but we'll run through hands again. 12? Huddart? 15? 18? 25? Nice. Okay, cool. Did you put your hands up twice there, Brian?
I did. I think they're different, but I like both of them very much.
Yeah, they are different, and it's always interesting to see, like, you know, it comes from the same new make spirit, right? So it's always look at kind of distilleries as families, and, you know, it's Mr. and Mrs. Smith or whoever it is, like, you know, it's Baxter, Macmillan, whoever it is, but it's the spirit's always the same. It comes from the same stills. It's always consistent. It has to be the same, and then the journey it takes through cask completely shifts it, but it always has that one core, you know, anchoring point that makes it a family. Is this an order, Metcalf? 25, 8, 15, 18, 12, Huddart. Nice. Can't split that. Love it. So, Anton, I believe there's one more dram. I think you're on mute. You there? Anton, you're still on mute, I think.
I'm on mute. Sorry. Yep. First time. Do you have this in front of you?
I don't, but what I do have to join you is a distillery exclusive that I picked up 2 weeks ago. So this is an ex-Spanish oak, aged 13 years, cask strength at 62.1 natural colour. You can see that it's pretty. These are all the great thing about our distillery edition as it stands, which we're bringing in a new one, is Malcolm and the team basically shortlist a few and then go, yeah, that's going to be the next one. They bottle it all and handwrite every single bottle, but the color on this, I mean, there's the 18, for example.
Big difference.
Huge difference, and that's 13 years in Spanish oak at cask.
So if you can see the color of the one we've got here,
that's amazing.
I know the background keeps on eating the bottle, but there we go. That's probably a good one. So what we've got for the last one is the signature. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get the label close enough. And maybe if I turn off the background, how do I do that? Choose virtual background and none. All right, so let's see how that goes. So I don't know if you guys can even read that the right way or not, but this is a Pulteney, obviously 2008, aged 12 years, sherry cask finish. So it had 33 months at least in sherry, which has been one of 600 bottles. It's 55.8, so not quite as strong as the one you've got there in terms of the cask strength. But it's, yeah, definitely on that sherry side. It's nowhere near as dark as the one you just held up. I would say by color, it looks similar to the 18 than anything.
It's not too far off, actually. I think it's because the lighting in here is pretty good today, surprisingly, for Glasgow. But
yeah, and
I think the color's pretty bang on the same.
Yeah, so they should this should be I guess somewhere similar to what you've got there. So for everyone else who's got the signature vintage bottling, yeah, let's hit us with some tasting notes for that. See if there's anything off the cuff that you get from it. Do you oh wow, that's a great start.
Josh, you need to come to distillery to get your hands on one of those. Just to let you know. The thing is, while you guys are noticing that, with cask strength, I used to work at Douglas Laing where we worked to cask strength all the time, and it's not a dare, right? It's not like daring you to do it. It's it's always good to, like, for me, like, nose and taste of that strength, but adding a little bit of water, getting it at cask strength gives you the opportunity to drink it the way you want to drink it. It doesn't dictate to you that you have to drink it at 40, 43, 46%. You can control it down to however you want. But alcohol, of course, is a really good carrier of flavor. So you guys are going to see, and what I'm seeing in this really big burst of flavor through. And that's why we based alcohol, aftershaves and perfumes in alcohols, because it carries flavor really, really well. So when we have it at that strength, I can only, God, I wish I was just up the road to grab one, but I can only imagine what it tastes like.
So Jared said spicy dark fruits and oranges. I definitely get the orange again, more pronounced than the last one. But anyone else getting anything particularly on the nose? Here we go. Is the Old Pulteney Distillery tour wheelchair accessible?
Not all of it. I'm trying to think. No, the visitor centre, the visitor centre and the tourist area, the history centre are. The filling store is, and the still room is from the ground level, but not upstairs. You'd have to go up stairs. So there are areas but not the full tour, unfortunately. Good question, Dave.
It sounds like it's covering most areas.
Yeah, the issue with it is that it's not changed since 1826. Like, it is the original building. You know, what you see behind Anton is the original like the original stone. It's Caithness quarry stone. So the stills like haven't moved in that long as well. So and the thing is, we can't expand out to make it more wheelchair accessible. We have to work within this postage stamp area. So it's just one of those things that it's a proper traditional distillery. It's two stills working at one point. And put that in perspective, you know, I adore Glenlivet, Glenfiddich, for example. They're running at 25 million litres of alcohol per year. When you put that to our 1.4, 1.5, let's say on average, or let's say mid-range, you know, it's a tiny distillery that we're running out of. So it's purely from that reason that we can't make it wheelchair accessible or more wheelchair accessible. Yeah, it's just that way. But I mean, if you go to most distilleries, you'll be able to get the full tour, which is great. You know, there are, if you look at Glenlivet, Glenfiddich, Macallan, amazing distilleries in Scotland that are just a bit larger, they will be wheelchair accessible. We have done exclusive distillery hand fills. This is one of them for distillery exclusive, but we have done them for people in the past. The big C words, not saying it. The big C words obviously presented a number of issues with that, and we're going to be introducing a new distillery exclusive, which I can't talk about, especially since it's been recorded, but we tasted that 2 weeks ago at our conference, which is absolutely delicious. I did a tasting of it on the beach, which was great. But I don't know if we're going to continue hand fills. I'd like to think we would, because Malcolm and the team really enjoy doing them and really enjoy taking to customers through what they've selected for a hand fill. So I'd like to continue to do. Do you have a dramming bar? Interestingly, we don't yet, but this is actually in very, very, very early discussions, as in over a couple of beers with the right people discussions. So watch this space, but it's probably going to be 5 years before we see something really come to fruition. But I'd like to think we might have something in 5 years, but very early doors. There's no way that's a guarantee.
What about on the palate? Anyone got any particular tasting notes now that you've had a sip or two, or comparisons with the others? Any thoughts? There's a heat of peat in this one.
So Pulteney's never done a peated run of spirit. However, we have used, I mean, that's what, how old was that? I was it 22?
12.
12, I read the two wrong. So we have done in the past heavily peated casks. Heavily charred casks, apologies. So smoke is definitely going to be a tasting note in previous expressions of Pulteney, but in terms of spirit, we've never included in peat and spirit. What do you think? Andrew, regarding Dornoch Hotel, because the one above it, Rory is a more extensive answer, which I'm happy to answer. The Dornoch, I was at Dornoch. I've been at Dornoch 8 times since January. I absolutely adore it. If anyone knows Simon and Phil, the Thompson brothers, that's where they own Dornoch Hotel. They produce Thompson's whiskey. They're amazing to talk to when you can catch them if you're down early enough for breakfast and they're passing through with their gilets and boots on. But it's an amazing place to stay if you're ever up. I highly recommend Dornoch. Gorgeous castle in Dornoch itself. Really good whiskey bar. And some very old and exclusive whiskey selected by Simon and Phil, who trouse whiskey auction sites for them, which is great. Anton, sorry, do you want to talk about the whiskey before I start throwing in and answering hundreds of questions?
No, I was just going to say that I was curious, given the styles and the sort of path we went through from the 12 right through up into the 25 there. If anyone had any thoughts on this as opposed to them, any striking differences, similarities? Like I said, this is 12 years with the 9 and a bit years in refill bourbon barrels, 33 months on sherry. Is that giving you any sense of a difference does the extra ABV, does that 10 extra percent make it a difference for you? Just any thoughts at all? Nope.
The Whiskey Club put one out just recently, but it didn't have an age statement on it. It was an old Pulteney cask strength.
Not 100% sure off memory, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. I saw that bottle recently, Brian, and I'm trying to remember because with our single cask bottlings for private bottlings, we don't put the age the same as we do for the 12, for example.
Okay.
It's kind of like almost written in. So for example, you see on the So Exclusive, it's like a 13 written in. So
Yeah.
it's not a dissimilar label to that.
I'll jump in, Stu, because I grabbed one. It says it was aged 2010 and bottled in 21. So I'm going with 11-year-old.
Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on the month, but yeah, it'll be roughly that.
Because I thought it was not too dissimilar to this, but I haven't got it beside me.
Well,
Okay.
that looks like a bourbon cask.
Yeah, it's 59% and it looks pure. Like
That
that.
looks like refill hoggies and bourbon potentially. Does it say the cask type on it, Davey?
There's not much on the bottle to tell you.
I can find out.
I'll just
I
read
can
the
find out.
packet.
Dave, you just said you tried some of this one with water because the alcohol was a bit overpowering. How did you find it once you put the water in? What changes did that make for you? Oh, sorry, as I was talking, it's just written that. Little water, green apples on the nose. There you go. And Jared's saying that the extra ABV makes a big difference, more spice. I think that's yep.
Hand selected American oak, ex-bourbon barrel on the box. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a barrel.
All right, well that's the sips drams for tonight covered. I'm going to keep sitting on this one for a little while. Is there any other questions? I know we've covered a fair few non-particularly whiskey related things along the way, but any other questions about any of these whiskies, any other Old Pulteney things in general? For Stuart, for anyone out there, feel free to come off mute and ask away.
There was a question from Rory that I missed earlier to keep the focus back in the whiskey was what happens to duty-free exclusive whiskies during COVID? And it's a very straightforward answer. There was no duty-free to be had, therefore all whiskey companies and spirits and beers and whatever just stop trading in that area. If you've got, we said it, COVID, damn it. C word was obviously a really difficult time for trading in whiskies, especially internationally. So if you've got duty-free bottlings taking up bottling lines, labeling lines, everything, and you're better using those bottling lines or bottling times to bottle Pulteney 12s or whatever it may be, whatever company it is, you're obviously better shifting your attention towards them than a market that doesn't exist for, or is not going to exist for the next 18 months at that time. Well, I think at that time we were quite optimistic and maybe we're thinking 6 months. Hey, I can't fit in any of my suits now. So it's just one of those things. It's better to shift to something that's going to potentially sell market than something that's we know is definitely not.
All right, is there any other questions for Stuart before we start to wrap this up?
I was going to say, Stu, with that most of Pulteney is sticking to bourbon and sherry type bottlings at the moment. Are you guys experimenting or looking to release anything like with ports or cognacs or rum type finishes?
No, I'm joking. Big nod there. So as I said, the bottling that I've got here, the single bottle, I'm really careful, 4 whiskeys deep early in the morning, and and it's recorded. So we have
stop the recording.
No, that won't work. We have we have things coming out soon. The really exciting thing is that I think Pulteney and a couple of other distilleries have been quite guilty of not releasing anything new. Let's take the last 2 years out of play, right? But say take the last 2 years out of play. Before that, I think for a good few years we were quite guilty of not releasing anything new. And I've not been with the company for that period of time, but my boss has been with the company for 15, 16 years. He's like, when you started, it's all of a sudden we're doing this and trialing that and experimenting, and we're going to do this. So we're in a period of not just Pulteney, but across our portfolio, some really interesting stuff. It's not just, new stuff. It's interesting things that are coming out. So I'm being really careful here, Damon. You put me on a bloody tightrope. But we have let's say a series of things coming out for Pulteney that I think is going to really capture attention from a flavour viewpoint of view. And it's not designed to target just your generic consumer, and it's been allocated in terms of number of cases and bottles for that reason. And it's not just your general consumer that's going to be attracted to this. This is kind of for your flavor focused consumer, not necessarily whiskey geeks, whiskey clubs and all that jazz, but the people that are really interested in something a bit different. And we have a few coming out. If that doesn't answer your question, because I do
hope they're going to come to Australia.
Sorry,
I do hope they come into Australia.
As far as I know, they will be. As far as I know, they definitely will be. So I'm really looking forward to seeing them come out, because I'm just looking forward to seeing people's reaction to it, and just seeing, we've had this range for quite a while now, so it's really interesting to see people that are Pulteney fans come out and taste it and go, oh right, didn't know you could do this. So yeah, it's coming, and it's bottled. And as I said, there's literally one of the first runs that was in a concept box, which we've not got, but that's it right behind me. So I've deliberately tilted it to the right, so if anyone wants to print and zoom, you're not seeing anything. But it's exciting. It's exciting times for us a distillery, and I hope for you guys to see it come out.
Well, that's something very much that we can look forward to. And hear all about that in the future. So I think that's about an appropriate time to say thank you very much, Stuart, for your time and for a great presentation. Very informative, and really enjoyed that. Also, thanks to Adam and the team for putting it all together with us. Appreciate your help as well. For all of you guys, especially the regulars who are on here quite a bit, thanks again for turning on and engaging in the comments and all that sort of thing. I'm sure you've enjoyed the drams the same as what the rest of us have. That code again, for anyone who's interested, is FIRSTDRAM10, all one word. That'll get you 10% off any of these bottlings tonight. And we've got some, our next set of tasting nights are coming up in May. We have 40 Spotted Gin, North Star, Glengoyne, and Kinglake. So keep an eye out for them across the next few weeks. We'll start dropping them, and they should all be great. So again, thank you everybody for coming on and spending your time with us, especially you, Stuart. I know you're early in the morning and you're five drams down, but I'm sure you'll power on like a champion. And just a round of applause for Stuart, everyone at home. Just thank you very much for that. And for everyone who may be watching this retrospectively on YouTube, hope you've enjoyed it all the same, and hope to see you live in the room for the next one. So, yeah, thank you, everyone. I'm just going to stop the recording, and have a great day or night, wherever you are. Stay safe.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys. Thanks.